Gente, o cacique, desculpa, Pedro Henrique, vai falar um pouquinho sobre o Tesla. E... Oi? Maria? Maria Fernanda, é Fórmula, né? E a Maria Fernanda também vai falar um pouquinho para a gente sobre o Fórmula.
Boa tarde. Meu nome é Pedro Henrique, eu sou capitão da equipe Fórmula Tesla FMG. A gente é uma equipe de competição que faz um carro elétrico. A gente compete na competição nacional da Fórmula SE Brasil, que acontece em Piracicaba, em novembro. Então, a gente é uma equipe que surgiu em 2016 para 2017. A gente tem apenas 3 aninhos de existência. E, ano passado, a gente foi vice-campeão na competição nacional e conseguimos trazer para o FMG esses troféus aqui. Enfim, a equipe fica no prédio do CPH, que é o Centro de Pesquisas Hidráulicas e Recursos Hídricos, e junto com, pertinho da equipe do Fórmula FMG, que a Maria vai falar um pouquinho para vocês daqui a pouco. Enfim, nossa equipe tem o foco de desenvolvimento de tecnologia da mobilidade elétrica no Brasil. Então, a nossa equipe tem um valor de desenvolver tecnologia para o Brasil. Então, nada que a gente desenvolve é escondido, é só para a gente, porque muitas equipes no Brasil têm isso de desenvolver, só que, como é uma competição, eles guardam as coisas que eles desenvolvem para eles. E dos nossos diferenciais aí é abrir mesmo o nosso conhecimento. Então, a gente publica vídeos no YouTube explicando como que a gente faz as coisas, enfim. E a gente gosta muito também, desde que a equipe surgiu, gosta de desenvolver tecnologia. Então, muitas coisas da equipe Tesla, que normalmente as outras equipes usam equipamentos comerciais, a gente desenvolve aqui na UFMG. Por exemplo, o BMS, que é o gerenciador das baterias do carro. Hoje, o nosso carro tem 48 células de bateria, e a gente consegue monitorar todas elas, tensão, corrente, temperatura, simultaneamente e ao vivo. Então, a gente consegue fazer tudo isso através de um BMS desenvolvido pela equipe desde 2016. E, normalmente, as outras equipes compram pronto, porque existe um BMS comercial. Outra coisa que a gente desenvolveu também foi o diferencial eletrônico. Eu acho que vocês sabem, todo mundo tem essa noção aqui, na hora que o carro está fazendo uma curva, as rodas percorrem raios diferentes, e elas têm que girar em velocidades diferentes para poder realizar a curva corretamente, mantendo toda a estabilidade do carro. E a gente desenvolveu um diferencial que, normalmente, em carros normais, é uma caixa de engrenagens que tem várias proporções ali de engrenagens que mantém a roda de fora girando mais rápido que a de dentro. E a gente desenvolveu uma placa, um software que consegue automaticamente, na curva, ele pega a velocidade que a roda precisa ali e manda o torque diferente para as rodas, e elas giram em velocidades diferentes. Isso tudo desenvolvido pela própria equipe. E, esse ano, a gente está implementando a frenagem regenerativa para, quando o carro está desacelerando ou freando, a gente tem consegue recarregar o banco de baterias, otimizando, assim, o uso das nossas baterias. Bom, a nossa equipe tem Instagram, Facebook. Se vocês quiserem conhecer mais, é só entrar lá, Tesla UFMG, e conhecer um pouco mais do nosso trabalho, do nosso projeto. Obrigado. Agora eu vou passar para a Maria.
Ei, gente, boa tarde. Meu nome é Maria Fernanda, sou estudante de Engenharia de Sistemas e eu participo da gestão da equipe Fórmula FMG. A gente, basicamente, é o irmão a combustão do Tesla. Os nossos carros participam da mesma competição, só que o nosso carro é a combustão. A nossa equipe, esse ano, completou uma década participando da competição em Piracicaba, então a gente tem bastante história, bastante aprendizado ao longo desses anos. E é muito importante que, quando você tem essa visão de participar de uma equipe de competição, você pense que você vai, tipo assim, aprender muita coisa. Você vai criar conexões, enfim. Assim como o Tesla, a gente procura desenvolver tudo que a gente usa no nosso carro. Os meninos, eles se dedicam bastante para fazer o nosso carro seja melhor. Apesar de que a gente sofre com, sei lá, falta de orçamento, esse tipo de coisa, a gente batalha para fazer o nosso carro melhor sempre. E é muito bom você participar como forma de crescimento de uma equipe de competição. O nosso processo seletivo vai abrir no começo do semestre que vem. Então, quem tiver interesse de participar, fiquem atentos nas redes sociais, tal, que a gente vai avisar lá. E é isso. Alguém tem alguma dúvida em relação a alguma das equipes, tal?
Vou falar pelo Tesla, depois ela explica do Fórmula. No Tesla, a gente exige uma carga horária de 20 horas semanais, são 80 horas por mês. Dá para conciliar bem com a faculdade, mas exige bastante organização para você conseguir fazer as matérias e estudar e conseguir conciliar com a equipe. Mas é bem tranquilo e dá para... Não é bem tranquilo, não vou mentir, mas dá para organizar e dá para participar. Infelizmente, o processo seletivo do Tesla já está quase, já passou da metade, a gente vai para a fase de trainee agora, então só ano que vem para participar. Mas quem tiver interesse pode já entrar em contato com a gente, se quiser visitar a oficina,
O Fórmula são 12 horas semanais, você tem que estar presente na oficina. Acaba que sempre você vai fazer um pouquinho mais e tal.
Mais alguma pergunta? Muito obrigada, Maria Fernanda. Hoje eu estou ótima, né? Obrigado, Pedro. É muito importante a gente ter a participação de vocês aqui, porque a gente sabe o tanto que a gente trabalha, né, para tudo acontecer. Muito obrigada.
Exatamente. Como é que você ficou de início?
Bom, então vamos começar. Já havia adiantado para vocês, né? Mas agora a gente vai ter a palestra do Team Chat, criando uma startup a partir de tecnologias da universidade, é o tema dele. Eu já gostaria de agradecer a participação, a presença do Tim aqui com a gente hoje. Ele é professor na Universidade Politécnica da Flórida e a gente está muito agradecido por você ter vindo aqui de tão longe falar para a gente. Muito obrigada.
Obrigado a vocês. Funciona. Ah, não, tudo bem.
Tudo bem? Está na televisão.
Ah, sim. Pronto. Tá bom, boa tarde. Desculpa que demora. Parece que as pessoas aqui em Minas Gerais são iguais em Flórida, quando tem chuva, esquece totalmente como dirigir, né? Então, eu posso conversar em português, mas quando eu olhei dessa apresentação que eu queria falar, obrigado. Eu olhei de algumas palavras e eu falei, vixe Maria, não posso dar em português não. Então, eu vou, se não tem problema, eu vou trocar para inglês, tá? Para falar sem problema, mas se você tem pergunta, pode... E espero que a gente possa fazer uma conversa mais tarde. Eu pode falar em português, eu entendo quase tudo. Então, today I want to talk about my experience in the university, taking an invention from the laboratory to the marketplace. I want to end with, I know most of you are students here, so you may or may not relate to this experience, but maybe you can see how this applies. But more importantly, when we get to the end, I want to talk about how these concepts of entrepreneurship can apply to engineering education, to education in general, and how we do our jobs in the university and connect with the marketplace outside. So I titled this Try, Fail, Learn, Pivot. These are kind of key words in the entrepreneurship community. But I'll focus, as I said, mostly on my journey here. So let me go back about 17 years, about 15 years, I guess, to talk about my path to commercialization, how I developed the technology, took it out of the university and into the marketplace, and actually sold products to a number of people you would know. So, once upon a time, there was a company called Cray Supercomputers. They still exist, actually. They're doing quite well now. They almost failed at one point. But in 2001, they had the first commercially available liquid, not liquid cooled, but spray cooled computer. And this is important because of spray cooling. They put the liquid right on the chips themselves. It's a special liquid that would not harm the chips. And they were able to get high performance. They needed to do this because each one of their processors was about 400 watts, which at the time was an awful lot. The density of heat inside exceeded the heat flux or the heat density that the space shuttle would experience when it come in through the atmosphere. And we know from the disasters that have happened that heat density is enough to melt aluminum. All right, so it's really intense heat on these computer chips. But they faced a problem. They achieved their objective, but they had hit the limit already after investing millions of dollars in this technology. So they came to the university where I was at, the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and asked, can you help us figure out why we can't push the limits any further? Of course, I made a proposal, and they accepted the proposal, and I said, okay, less than 12 months, I'll have your answer. Well, being a typical university professor, I was a little optimistic on that. It took us more like 3 years to get their answer, but we did. And this is a picture of some of the research we performed using flow visualization and studying the fluid dynamics of this behavior. And we came up with models. I'm going to jump down here so I can, there we go. So I can see what you're seeing and point at it. We came up with models, did the good scientific thing, right? We did careful research. This is actually a transparent heater, and we could observe the boiling and interaction of the sprays with the surface. We're able to predict that behavior and describe the limitations that the company was experiencing. So that's great. The company was kind of happy, but we missed our window of opportunity by about 1.5 years at least to get into the next product. So universities kind of run at this slow pace and are often behind where the companies are because they need to make money. They can't wait for us to come up with brilliant new ideas. But it was still great. I learned a lot. And one of the things that we learned, digging deeper into this problem, was that the way that people understood this process, this spray cooling, the impingement of droplets on a surface and how you removed heat from that surface, the way that it was being presented in the literature and the way that it was being thought of in the industry was completely incorrect. The idea was the energy comes into the fluid and evaporates, turns into a vapor, and then is forced out as a vapor. But this was not happening almost at all. All right, it was primarily what was happening was too much liquid was being sent to the surface to evaporate, so it was turning into a film. The droplets were hitting the surface and creating bubbles. And those bubbles were what was doing all the magic. Right? They were sliding on the surface and creating interfaces to create vapor and so on. So we published this with the evidence that this was true, but the academic community, that very small community that cared about spray impingement heat transfer, they did not think this was such a great idea. So when I would apply for more funding, I would get rejected because, oh, you can't say this, you can't do this. And I could say, yes, I can, I've got a paper to prove it. No, it wasn't really that accepted. So I actually had to move my research program, this piece of my research program, away from this because I wasn't making progress and I couldn't convince my colleagues that what they had spent the last 10 or 15 years doing was incorrect, right? And I mean, I'm a nice guy. I wasn't like being a jerk about it, but it was just a bit of a roadblock. So one of the first things I want to point out is our conclusions were not popular, and this is one of the first limits in academia to innovation. It's ourselves. In academia, the currency, the money, if you will, that matters in academia is your reputation and the number of papers you published. It's not necessarily the amount of money you earn. And one of the things that this does is if I published 5 papers that all said, this is the mechanism for this physical behavior, or this is the way this system works, and somebody else comes along and says, no, it's not, it's different. My response is, I want them to be wrong so that people trust me, because as an academic, that's what makes me famous, that's what makes me get more invitations to conferences and so on. And so we have this ingrained system of peer review and so on that has its very strong benefits, but has the negative aspect that ideas can become ingrained that aren't necessarily correct, and definitely innovation, surprisingly, is often not welcome, which is very surprising. So innovation often hides an alternative hypotheses that aren't necessarily welcome in a well-established field. One more example I'll give you. If any of you have taken a heat transfer class or have studied anything about boiling, boiling is thought to occur, or is taught to occur in the textbooks as requiring little cavities, little pits or holes in a surface where vapor can be trapped. And then when you heat that up, that vapor leaves, that creates a bubble that leaves and leaves behind a little vapor, which repeats the process. That is completely wrong. Say a whole lot of things there. It's completely wrong. It may occur in some occasions, but it's not the primary mechanism. And to be honest, people have observed this for years and years. When we looked into this and asked, why do people believe this? Why are people publishing this? And why is it when you publish an alternative view or try to publish an alternative view, you get shot down? Well, it turns out that one of the very first studies on boiling was done back in the 1880s. And these people were writing about nucleation, the formation of bubbles due to heat, and they couldn't explain it. So they just guessed. They said, well, one way this could happen is by this vapor trapping mechanism. Ever since then, that has been the explanation, but there was never proof of it. This occurs in so many different situations. It's scary. So how do we break out of that? Well, I don't know exactly the answer, but we'll talk about that. I have some ideas on that. So I had to take a detour, but years later, I continued working in cooling, switched from the sprays area to impinging jets. Just taking, this is a small needle, actually, 1 millimeter across approximately, and taking a jet of fluid and impinging it on a surface and removing heat this way. And this is for a power electronics project. This is actually for the US military for cooling a very, very high-powered converter box. And what we found, completely by accident actually, I wanted to do this, but I didn't know it would happen this way. We found that with the use of a jet and controlling the pressure surrounding it, we could make what looks like boiling, like when you're making spaghetti or pasta or boiling eggs or something, we could make that behavior occur instantaneously, at will. And it was extremely interesting and not something I could explain very well. And I showed this to experts in the field. I happened to have one of the biggest experts in nucleation and bubble formation come to my lab. Not he was seeing somebody else, but I convinced him to come take a look at this, and he couldn't explain it either. I have a hypothesis, and the hypothesis is that tiny little bubbles were being formed by cavitation or by another process inside of the nozzle, and when those bubbles got near the hot surface, they suddenly expanded and made it look like we were generating bubbles at the surface like we would in normal boiling. It doesn't matter in the end, because in the end, what it said to me is we could get really high performance, really the boiling-like behavior, really good heat transfer, without requiring the computer chips in this case to get too hot, to overheat before this process would occur, which was what was happening in other experiments. So, long story, cutting through, I filed for patents to the university on this process, which was kind of accidental, but it was interesting and it was repeatable, and we took lots of data, actually spent 2 more years studying that, and found it to be very reliable and very consistent and very repeatable, which started coming to me as like, well, if I've got something that's repeatable, reliable, I can put it in the field, and from year to year it's going to behave the same way. That sounds like a product to me. So, but the university is not a great place to do product development, okay? You've got to be producing papers and meeting the objectives of your projects and so on. So I borrowed money, okay? I got projects, paid students, and made sure we achieved those objectives, but then I used a little bit of that money to do a little extra work and look at ways that we could build a practical device, not a laboratory device, but a practical device. We explored manufacturing techniques, because if this was going to be scalable, we had to be able to make thousands or millions of these with very intricate geometries. And it turns out that this was just the moment that the technology of 3D printing was coming online in a scalable fashion. And so we were one of the first groups to use 3D printing for practical purposes. This was back in about 2009. We were developing practical and not mass-produced, but scalably produced modules that could create even, the hard part was creating even jet distributions or liquid distributions in these jets with pretty precise dimensions inside, and with a material that would withstand high temperatures above 100 degrees Celsius. So we found materials that we could 3D print, and so we developed that. Another issue that came up is deals with the seals and tubing and so on. So I thought, okay, in my head, this is interesting. We can have a great performing heat removal process for computer chips. So here's how we'd install it in a server. This is very similar to the servers that are serving up your information on Facebook or whatever you're using. And we can scale it out. We still have a lot of questions, but maybe I can start a company. The problem is that I was really now into product development, and the university is really a bad place for that. So once it became too hard to find practical applied research money in the university, I launched a company. I actually launched it from Brazil. I spent a year in São Carlos, São Paulo, at the university there. And while I was there, I decided it's time. I'm going to start the company. It's kind of crazy, but so I flew back to the States, signed all the paperwork. We got the company started, and said, okay, great, I've got this great idea. I had people who believed in it. I thought I can get investors. But then realized, well, if you're going to have a system, you've got to deal with really mundane things, like what kind of tubing can you use? What kind of plastics will be reliable? O-rings, seals, connectors, even, what's the material the brackets made out of? And then how do we manufacture all of this and do it cheaply? And what's the market even look like? All of this while I was still a professor at the university. And so then trying to manage another challenge of university research is conflicts of interest. How do I guarantee that what I'm doing doesn't attract negative attention or come across in any way like I'm using taxpayer dollars to enrich myself, right? It's at the end the problem that we have to watch out for. And eventually this became just so challenging that I left the university. I had to raise some investor funds, and I left the university so I would not have those conflicts of interest, that I would have the freedom to do the product development, the sales, and so on, without the constraints of the university. So in 2015, I actually went full-time with my company, which I called Ebullient, and we produced product, actually raised another total of about $3 million in funding, and developed a full system. Each one of these areas took quite a bit of effort, actually, of testing and modeling and so on, but we got it to the point where even though the physics inside were very complicated, a user could just plug it in and it would work, and they could unplug it, plug it in again, and it would work. These are the three main components there, and you can see installed in a server rack. We partnered with large companies. CPC is a fitting or connector manufacturer. We partnered with Carbon. I don't know if you've heard of Carbon 3D, the 3D printing. They're now really huge, actually. At the time, they were a startup like us, so it was great. I could go out there and visit with them, and they helped us with developing a scalable manufacturing process. I could actually 3D print our cooling modules cheaper than injection molding them. It was amazing, and that was just a really exciting time to be working in this space because of the development of 3D printing at the same time. And then, really pushing this forward. So reasonably successful, 2 generations of products. I had as many as 12 people in the company. We applied for 50 patents, and we've received 15 of those already. And then developed strong partnerships with, looking at projects at Google, at Facebook, at Alibaba, Baidu, Huawei, just virtually all the leading IT companies were realizing, okay, right now we're kind of okay, but what's coming is artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles. Now you can use your smartphone and get instant, filters for Snapchat and so on. That takes a lot of computing power. That takes, really high-powered chips. And they were seeing this, and how do we do this? And so, if you notice, Google is now liquid cooling their TensorFlow processors. That was something that I was working on in the company, and so on. So we were able to develop these partnerships and influence the data center industry, I think, in a very positive way. But you need cash, and you need investors that you can work with. And this is a whole other discussion that I won't get into unless you wish to ask about it. But in the end, it became rather difficult to balance the desires of the investors who wanted to get rich quick and the need to build a hardware product that needed a little more time. So I wanted to go back to the university space. I really love teaching and I love working with students. And I chose to go to Florida Polytechnic University, brand new university in Central Florida, about 35 minutes from Disney. And we're 5 years old now. So it's another startup culture. And I wanted to bring my experience as an entrepreneur, but also as an experienced professor and researcher to that space and try to combine the two. And so what I'm sharing with you here are some of my experiences and some of my thoughts about combining entrepreneurship with engineering education and engineering research. Still being formed, all right, so this presentation's may have a little rough edges, and really happy to get your feedback and discussion on this. But the point is, on that journey, remember, that was about a total of about 15 years from start to when I left the company. The company still exists. They've got all those patents that they're trying to sell. But it's not a fast process. It's not an easy process. And yet it was extremely rewarding, and I highly recommend it. And I think that we can do better with this process. So what did I learn? Here are the key points that I want to discuss. Based on my experience, what are the barriers to innovation, particularly taking commercialization of university research? And I want to discuss these 5 basic areas: academic culture, the incentives for faculty and student innovation, tech transfer. I'll try to explain what that is. Universities are really bad at that, typically. University support itself and community resources. So, academic culture. This is something you might have seen. It didn't print out really well because I compressed the file a lot to get it here before I got here. But this is a statics class, all right? I think a lot of you are mechanical engineers, so you've had your statics class, and it's a very linear class. You know, we're going to teach you about vectors, and then we're going to apply those to you know, ropes and things like that. Then we're going to go to trusses and blah, blah, blah. All right? Each step builds on the previous, because there's this academic theory or understanding that humans learn by a process called scaffolding. All right, you build a base and you build a frame, and then you fill in that frame, and then you can build on that. And so it's scaffolding. It's like constructing a building of knowledge. But educators tend to think that they're the only ones doing that. All right, so I've got to construct this tower, this mechanical engineering degree, on the basis that I build, and ignore the fact that you've got real life experiences. All right, we don't do very well in bringing in the real world into your educational experience. But this is engineering, and for some students, it's very comforting. It's like, great, okay, I learn A, B builds on A, so I learn B, C builds on B, so I learn C, and so on. For other people like me, it was an awful experience. I hated every class I ever took, because I don't think that way. I've got to know, why the hell are we learning about D? I don't care about D. I want to know what's the purpose here, right? And the educational experience is kind of frustrating that way. This produces engineers who are often linear as well. So I had an experience. I did a research project in consulting with a large automotive company, one of the world's largest. And it was really interesting. One of my other areas of research is alternative thermodynamic cycles, or in this case, recovering heat energy from a diesel engine and trying to put it to use somewhere else in the engine, either generating electricity or directly running the air conditioning or something like this. And so this is a pretty applied research, but there were still some really interesting pieces that were not well understood. And so I accepted the project and worked with this company, and this extremely talented engineer, one of the definitely ranks among the most talented engineers I've ever met in my life, all right? This guy could literally just think a thought and it would appear on the screen. His hand was just flying through Pro Engineer so fast I couldn't even see it, and boom, I mean, he was good. But the culture of that company was, we plan out the project from day 1 to day 100 or whatever it is, do our Gantt charts, schedule everything out, have our progress reports and everything. And no matter what, we've got to hit this date, right? So this is not even a year long, okay? It's scheduled for the project. Well, I slapped the fail on there because the project ended up being almost 2 years long. All right? There's no way we were going to hit that schedule, number one. Number two, he wanted to design the entire engine from start to finish in CAD, then have the parts all manufactured, and then assemble it, and then test it. All right? So that sounds like it makes sense, actually, when I say it that way. But an engine is a really complex thing. And if one part's not working right, the whole engine's probably not going to work right. And we were including some key parts. So we were adding a heat exchanger to the exhaust gas return. And if you get your exhaust gas return wrong, you can either burn up your engine or you can make it run really badly. We were adding heat exchanger into the exhaust pipe. If that doesn't work right, you can back up your engine. It will still run, but it will tend to overheat and will be very inefficient, and many things like this. And on the Rankine cycle side, on the energy generation side, we had no previous data. There was no data in the literature. There was nothing we could use on how much heat we could actually pull out of these two places and whether the expander, the generator would even work and all these things. So everything was an unknown. And in my experience, which is, my experience that I had learned from doing research was I probably need to do a small project, build something to just test one heat exchanger, characterize that really well, and say, okay, yep, this is the design that's going to work. Now let's move on to the expander. Let's move on to the condenser, and so on. But I've discovered many companies don't work this way. And so, as a result, we assembled the whole thing, went to the plant, which was a long ways from my home, turned it on, and within 10 minutes, we literally burnt the system up. $1 million and about 12 people's work literally up in flames, all right, because we didn't do an iterative design process. So other examples I've experienced in academia are you write a conference abstract, you get accepted, you show up, and your presentation is a bit different than your abstract because it turns out you learned something in the 9 months since you submitted that. That's not very acceptable. You try a new way of teaching, and your students do really well. They make great grades. And your colleagues say, wait, your students can't be that smart. Your grades can't be that high. There's no way. And you're like, well, maybe a different way of approaching it was a good thing. Or, of course, we've always done it this way. Incentives. I'm going to speed up through this and we can have a discussion. But as a faculty member where I was at, there was no credit for doing patents. There's no credit for innovation. There's very poor compensation. So you spent all this time creating a patent, and you didn't receive any monetary value for it, really. So you just did it because you were passionate about it. Collaboration with industry can be perversely or negatively incentivized. So I can go into this, but there's generally our needs as academics and their needs as companies are often in conflict. Our assessment was based not on what good we do for the world, but on how many papers you publish. To some extent, how many people actually read those papers, but mostly it's just numbers, sheer numbers. Funding sources are limited, and it's a linear process that's rewarded. Iteration or making mistakes and learning from those mistakes is not rewarded. Entrepreneurship is also viewed very suspiciously, very, very strange. This is, I won't go through all this again, but this is the environment at MIT, which describes something very differently, where the culture is entrepreneurship is encouraged. It's demonstrated. Students see it from day one. These professors have gone out and started companies, and these students have gone off and started companies, and it leads to this positive feedback loop, which encourages innovation. It's a model that can be looked at, and again, we can discuss this more, but I want to get to some of these other barriers. Tech transfer. Tech transfer means taking intellectual property, patents, trade secrets, research results, and transferring them to companies so that they can use them and innovate with them. Usually this happens through a centralized office at the university. I don't know exactly how it works here in Brazil, but and those people don't have a clue what you did, right? And they're the ones that are supposed to be marketing your information, your patent or whatever, and it just doesn't work. all right? And then when they actually find somebody who's interested, the faculty member is the one who needs to sell it and do the transfer. And you're not paid to do that. You're paid to teach and write papers, not to talk to companies about your invention. And so there's often negative incentives. The university also, in my case, I was at the University of Wisconsin, one of the world's top universities, one of the world's top research universities, $2 billion a year in research expenditures, all right? There's only a few universities in the world with more than that. And yet there was virtually no environment to help somebody like me trying to create a product and get it out in the marketplace. In fact, a lot of the information I received turned out to be just flat wrong, all right? So there's not great support structures. Really difficult to find mentorship, no time to do it, and conflicts of interest. We also need help. Like, I got a PhD, right? I'm not dumb, but I'd never seen these financial instruments that you need to run a company. I'd never seen a P&L. I'd never seen a balance sheet. I could use Excel to create complex models of my data, but when it came to cash flow analysis, I'd never seen that before. And when you've got a payroll to meet, cash flow analysis turns out to be really important. So, having resources that teach you these things about finance, HR, the laws involved in hiring and firing people, marketing, and business strategy. How do you plan ahead? These are all things I had to learn on my own. And luckily, did okay. But finally, my network as an academic, your network as a student, is primarily among those people that you know, which are going to be people who do exactly what you do. Right? So I knew other academics, I knew other researchers in industry, but I didn't know the people who actually could write the checks and buy my product. That's a problem, all right? And I didn't know people who could come in and help me with my business. I wanted to hire a CEO and stay a professor. I couldn't find somebody. So I left, became my own CEO, but it was really, really hard. So one thing I just wanted to get to my high points here, and then, again, we can discuss as we have time. I believe in a broad entrepreneurial education because I believe it creates leaders. If you are an entrepreneur, you will have confidence, as a student, you'll have confidence to step into the unknown and solve problems outside your comfort zone. All right? That's what an entrepreneur does. You have the ability to identify opportunities for new product development or new innovations to better meet your customers' needs. You have the ability to identify a plan of action, know what to do when everything's very uncertain. Entrepreneurship, and Eric Ries describes a startup as an organization of human beings trying to navigate in a climate of complete uncertainty. All right? So in engineering class, you're taking statics, fluids, whatever your structures. You're defined. It's all there. There's a syllabus. If you read these chapters and you do this homework and you study for this exam, yeah, you'll be okay. That's not the real world. All right? We know that as faculty. We're trying to prepare you for the real world, but it's a different environment. Whereas the whole point of entrepreneurship, training, and exposure is to be able to deal with that uncertainty. The ability to communicate clearly. All right? I'm not sure I'm doing a great job here today, but I have a little bit of rush here. But the ability to come in, even rushed, and hopefully give a coherent talk. Right? The ability to explain what you need and what you're passionate about in 5 minutes or less, and be able to get your point across. Accomplish your objective using the least amount of resources possible. That's, again, what an entrepreneur has to do. And set challenging but achievable goals and work in teams. So a framework for doing this is a combination of something you might have heard, talked about here, design thinking. It's a way of going from idea to product. An idea is not a product. Get that out of your head. An idea could turn into multiple products. The process for getting from idea to product, for doing that is design thinking, where you empathize, you define, ideate, prototype, and test. And then once you've got a product, you've got to find your product market fit. You've got to find somebody who will actually pay money for that. And that process can be symbolized by the lean startup process. For faculty, entrepreneurial thinking can help you engage with companies and also to write better proposals. Because that funding agency is basically just a client. You need to empathize. You need to understand what they want. You need to reframe, ask the question in a different way so that you can write a unique proposal that will be funded. You need to ideate. You need to come up with new ways of approaching that problem. And you need to prototype or write your proposal and test it out by sending it for evaluation. So I had proposed at Florida Polytechnic to teach this sort of thinking to our faculty so that they would not think of a proposal as having to start from beginning to end and have this perfect proposal, but to iterate, to try to think about each of these processes in writing a proposal, take the time to get to know the program, the company, or whatever, whoever was paying, sponsored, and so on. But research is essentially an entrepreneurial activity. It's an unknown thing, and entrepreneurship skills can be really helpful. So here's design thinking again. Empathize, redefine, or reframe, ideate, prototype, and test. And finally, how do universities work with incubators and small company startups? And I'll wrap up real quickly, I promise. But this is something that's going on here in Minas Gerais. It's going on here at this university. You have an incubator. There are incubators here in Belo Horizonte. But at least in the United States, most of the output is pretty silly, all right? They get a company, they form a company. It's really easy to form a company and kill a company in the United States. But they don't produce anything, all right? They may have a nice trademark, a nice logo, but they haven't gone through the actual process of figuring out what a product even is. They have an idea, but not a product. And once they have that product, they haven't figured out who's actually going to buy that product. They don't have a market fit. And that's not really emphasized. And it's not really taught well. And not really valued. And so this is where I was wanting to take our resources. We're a technical university only, no business school, just engineers and computer scientists, and use that to support these companies with ideas but no products, right? And I think this is the way that you, particularly in the engineering departments here at this university, can contribute to the startup culture, to the innovation culture here in Minas Gerais. So with that, this is a concept. I'll leave this up on the screen. You can see, but we are developing an online incubator for our students so that even students who can't take our courses in entrepreneurship can participate in entrepreneurship. It's completely online, so it doesn't require a lot of resources, and yet it contains a full curriculum to teach students basic things: lean startup, how to figure out a business model, how to pitch their ideas, how to basically how to do cash flow analysis, how to do business strategy, and all that sort of thing. It's not equivalent to a full startup course experience or entrepreneurship course experience, but it's a way that we could scale this without spending millions of dollars on a facility and professors and so on, which we don't have. So a way to try to be efficient. And if I'm not the one who's driving this, actually, if you're interested in this, I can connect you with that person. I think it's a great idea, and hopefully will generate a lot of results. And again, if I go back to this slide, for you students, the benefit is a broad entrepreneurial education, I think, enables leaders and differentiates you from all the other engineers out there. It gives you the potential to be a leader in your field. So I hit a whole bunch of points very broadly and very quickly. I'm happy to dig deeper on any of those with any questions you might have. So, muito obrigado. Espero que você possa tirar alguma coisa boa dessa apresentação.
A gente tem tempo para uma pergunta? Alguém? Ninguém?
Nada?
Não precisa ter vergonha, não, gente.
Assustei todo mundo, né? Aqui. Sim, claro.
Primeiro, muito obrigado pela sua apresentação e por ter vindo aqui hoje. Eu gostaria de te perguntar como na faculdade você consegue identificar a janela de oportunidade de um negócio.
Sim. Então, enquanto eu estava aqui, de verdade, em Brasil, eu tinha um pouco mais de tempo para fazer um análise do marketing, né? Do mercado. Mas esse é como mágico, né? Mágico negro. Não é uma ciência. Então, eu tentei olhar de todas as oportunidades agora, naquele momento, e também mapa de tecnologia. Onde estava indo o mercado? Eu pensei, ok, se eu quero entrar no mercado e fazer dinheiro, eu preciso começar a desenhar o produto aqui e ter protótipo, alguma coisa assim, a prototype. Nesse tempo, esse dia aqui, e então eu preciso começar agora. Então eu basicamente precisava fazer uma janela. Eu não pude esperar e procurar. Eu precisava olhar e dizer, ok, se eu quero fazer isso, eu preciso começar assim. Como eu vou achar recursos para fazer? Ok, vou procurar alguém que tem dinheiro, eu vou prometer alguma coisa, mas no lado eu vou fazer essa outra coisa e começar assim.
I have a second question.
Yeah,
I noticed that your business used a lot of patents, 50. There is more than like departments here in UFMG. So what was the strategy for having that a lot of patents and the costs?
Sim, ok. Então, 2, 3 perguntas ali. Primeiro, eu consegui convencer um advogado muito bom com estoque, para trabalhar por estoque somente. Então, era muito barato para fazer esses patentes. Segundo, essa é uma palestra inteira para conversar sobre estratégia de patente, mas basicamente você precisa fazer seu centro core, que é mais importante, e depois fazer patentes que construir uma barreira ao redor do seu core, para ninguém nem aproximar sua ideia central. Então, ele entendia essa estratégia muito bom e eu estava muito feliz com essa. Também a gente fez coisa como design patent, só proteger o look and feel, o look, sim, do produto para que ninguém da China possa entrar com produto inferior e machucar nossa reputação, né? Então era uma estratégia bem profundo, não profundo, mas a gente passou muito tempo fazendo essa estratégia e enfim, se não tinha esse advogado trabalhando bem barato, eu precisava fazer mais focalizado em as coisas mais importantes. Sim. Sim, claro.
Pessoal, a gente está sem tempo, mas o Tim está ali fora. Se vocês quiserem perguntar para ele depois, é só chegar ali. A gente vai...
Tá, muito obrigado, não.
Bom, a nossa terceira palestra do dia é Mina Borges, formada em Engenharia Mecânica, Engenharia de Petróleo e Educadora Financeira. Ela é fundadora do canal Economirna. Mirna, muito obrigada por você ter aceito o nosso convite. É uma honra recebê-la aqui, na UFMG e na SEMMAP. A palavra